Hello. Today, going to talk about Edgar Allan Poe. A little more specifically about his story, the Cask of Amontillado, or Amontillado. Sorry about that. Um, so Poe, very famous writer, American writer. A lot of people like him. Considered a one of America's greatest horror writers, and that's where I start to disagree with people. Um, Let it be known this video is going to be mostly my opinion here. People are going to disagree with me. You have that right. Um, so Poe liked to write about dark matters. You know, so yes, he could be viewed as a horror writer in some extent, but in my opinion, a lot of his stories weren't meant to be horror stories. And so, um, just because he wanted to write about creepy things doesn't mean that his intent was to scare people. Put on top of that, Poe had a lot of good ideas, I think. You know, his you know his plot lines are classic in a sense, but at the same time, in my opinion, his writing isn't the best. And again, people can criticize me on that all they want, but again, it's my opinion. I'm allowed my opinion. You're allowed your opinion. Um, so let's see. 1946, no, 1846 is when the Cask of Amontillado came out. Um, Now, my first problem with this story, and again, the premise of the story is great. It's just, in my opinion, it wasn't carried out well. So the version I read recently, it was about 8 pages long, with that included dialogue. So it's a very short story, easy to read. Um, that said, he could have made it a little longer and just gone into a little more detail and made it a little better. Also, before we get into the story itself, spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking about the story. So if you've never read it before and you want to read it in the future, you might want to just quit this video now. But who was Poe's audience? Again, he was an American writer. Presumably, he did, you know, have a following in Europe too. So I think the French and the English liked his writings as well. If I'm not mistaken, he traveled in France some. A lot of his stories take place in France. I think the Cask of Amontillado actually takes place. Amontillado. Sorry about that. I'm going to mispronounce that entire video. I admit. I think that takes place in France. I'm not 100% sure. The main character's name is Montresor, or the narrator's name is Montresor. His friend's name is Fortunato. Well, not his friend, but we'll get to that later. His friend is Fortunato, who is an Italian. He speaks of him as if, as if they are not in Italy. Montresor's house, it is in the Parisian fashion, although he doesn't necessarily say it's in Paris. So the story takes place during Carnival time, so that would indicate it takes place somewhere around the Mediterranean. So my guess is it takes place at some place in France around the Mediterranean coast, or possibly in Italy. But like I said, he never really says. Not really important to the story. That's actually not the when I say the story has problems with it. That's not really one of them. But like I said, we'll get to that later. So his writing was, again, mid 1800s for a primarily American audience. Now we have to consider in the 1800s, Dickens had started writing about 10 to 20 years before Poe wrote. Mark Twain was going to start writing afterwards. We know that American school children were reading Dickens and Twain almost as soon as they were released. Dickens took a little longer because Dickens lived overseas. Um, that's not to say that school children were reading Poe, but it shows, the common man in America. Education was good in America at the time, and school children were reading books that were being printed. It makes sense that their parents were also reading books that were recently printed. So a lot of Poe's audience would have been middle class America, maybe. That said, a lot of what he writes appears to be written for upper class, or he makes a lot of references that I don't think that common middle class would have gotten. I read this story. I looked up a bunch of stuff online, which they couldn't do back in the 1800s. Maybe people would have known better. Maybe not. But I'm going to guess that a lot of his audience just wouldn't have gotten some of what he was writing, and so that's one of the reasons I don't think he was as good a writer as a lot of people think. Is he wasn't, in my opinion, considering his audience. He was writing for people who had a better education. Like I said, people were well educated in the past, but they didn't necessarily know what Amontillado was, or they didn't necessarily know a lot of the references that he makes. I could be wrong on that, but I'm sort of taking a guess there. But I'm going to assume that I'm right, obviously. So Poe starts, he opens. Let's see, his opening lines. I wrote this down here somewhere. The thousands of injuries of Fortunato I had borne as I best could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. So this is a story about revenge, obviously. That's about it. That's all we get about these insults or this, what is the 1,000 injuries? We don't get any more on that. Throughout the book, I'm reading the story and I'm thinking, okay, so what did Fortunato do to this poor guy that he wants his revenge? And the story never tells us. We're just supposed to accept it. Second line. You who so well know the nature of my soul will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. So he's mad at Fortunato. He's seeking revenge for Fortunato. He doesn't let Fortunato know. He keeps it hidden. And we who know his soul, well, we don't know this guy. In fact, we throughout the book, again, we don't get a lot where we can really tell a lot about his character. All we get is this one line where he says, I kept it hidden that I was mad at him. That way, naturally the revenge could come better. And so those are Poe's opening lines to the story. And it's like he's expecting stuff from his audience which he doesn't later reveal to us. We were supposed to make assumptions. And, good writing doesn't really do that. It's sort of, up to a point, you have to spell things out for your reader. Poe failed to do that in this case. Now, we do get a few things. He does talk about Fortunato, like most Italians, a little bit of, stereotyping here, but that's, fine with that. He does not know as much about art and gemmery, which is basically gemstones, as he claims to. But that's a problem that all Italians have, according to the narrator. And he says it's something that they inflict upon English and Austrian people. As they go up and they make fun of them and you don't understand art and you don't know this fancy gemstone or whatever, when they themselves don't know a lot about it. That said, again, not Fortunato, but the what's the guy's name? Montresor is apparently French. So Italians, they make fun of English and Austrians, and so that's not necessarily the insult that he gave to Montresor. Um, we still don't know what that is. We're never really going to find out what that is, what the insult is. And that's, like I said, part of why I say this isn't a well written story. Um, Now, this said, Fortunato does have one good point, and that is he knows wine. And that's Montresor comes out and says that, with all his other faults, he's good. He's a connoisseur of wines, and he knows them well. And so Montresor is actually going to use wine in order to get his revenge. Except he then turns around and contradicts us. Now, to a point, like I said, this takes place during carnival time. Montresor's out on the street. He comes across Fortunato. Fortunato's got he's wearing motley, or basically he's got a jester's outfit on, and he's been drinking. He's partly drunk or mostly drunk already. He goes, greets him, says hello. I got a favor to ask of you. I've recently purchased a pipe of Amontillado. Again, not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sorry about it. And I'm just not sure if I made a good purchase or if I was cheated or not. I don't even know if it really is Amontillado. I could have been fooled. Could you help me? And Fortunato's like, yeah, sure. This is. So what is Amontillado? Amontillado, look this up. It is a form of sherry. It's double aged. So you age it for a while, you stop the aging process, then you start to age it again. During the second aging process, you have to do it just right, or else it will over oxidize and you'll ruin the whole thing. So basically, it's rare, or it's not necessarily rare, but it's hard to make, and so therefore it's going to be more important, or more expensive. It's originated in Montilla, Spain, so that's why it's called Amontillado, because it comes from Montilla. So obviously Fortunato hears he's got this rare wine, or I'm assuming it's a rare wine. He's obviously interested in it. But no. Obviously, you're at a festival, you're having a good time. I'm not going to bother you with this. I'm going to go get Lucicia, and Lucicia can, he knows wines. I'll ask him to check it out for me. Not Lucicia. Lucicia, he wouldn't know Amontillado from sherry. Problem number 2 now. So like I said earlier, Amontillado is a form of sherry. Sherry is wine. That's one thing. You watch TV and people talk about, drinking wine. Like a lot of sitcoms will act like there's a difference between wine and sherry. And it's like, he wasn't drinking wine, he was just drinking sherry. No, sherry is a type of wine. It's a subcategory of wine, if you want. And Amontillado is a type of sherry. But Fortunato comes out and says Lucicia doesn't know the difference between Amontillado and sherry. But Fortunato is supposed to be an expert on wine. So here, to some extent, we have Poe contradicting himself. Fortunato is supposed to be drunk. And so we can write this off and say that he's drunk, he doesn't know what he's talking about, or, he knows wine, but he's drunk, and so he's just misspeaking here. We can accept that. To be fair, like I said, most of Poe's audience wouldn't know what Amontillado is. So only the very rich people, the upper class who might have come across Amontillado, or who know wines better than the lower class, might be able to come out and say, this is Poe's point. The rest of us, like I said, unless we look it up on the internet, we don't. And so, like I said, Poe, in my opinion, could have considered his audience better. He could have written a little more explanation into the story than he did. Which is, like I said, one of the reasons why I question his writing in this particular story. Now, just for the record, Lucchese, technically, not technically, but it basically means from Lucca. And Lucca was a region of Italy famous for wines. So, again, the fact that Fortunato is, Poe decided to name this guy Luchisia or Lucchesio, and Fortunato is making fun of him. And again, we get a little bit into Fortunato's character here. He's proud. He makes fun of people who, if we go by their name, they ought to get a little more respect when it comes to wine. Lucca, from what I found online, it was famous for wines as far back as the Middle Ages. So you would think someone named Lucchese would hopefully know a little more about wine. Or, I think that's why Poe picked the name. Again, a lot of his audience wouldn't have known this. Foreshadowing. So they go down into the vaults. And, well, at one point, Fortunato's got a cough. And he's are you sure about this? You sure you want to go with me? Because they're in Matresser's basement. So these are like the catacombs where his family used to bury people, and now Matresser uses it as a winery or a place to store his wine. There are still bones around. He didn't clean it out completely. So this is one of those weird things where, again, Poe's going for the macabre here, but at the same time, he just doesn't do it well. It's like, why are we passing dead bodies on the way to the wine? Why, who would do this? You think, he would have done something, at least made an attempt to separate them a little bit. Obviously, yes, you got the wine cellar. You want the wine cellar. You don't necessarily want the casks of wine next to your dead bodies. Or your ancestors' dead bodies, as it is. But, again, Poe wants to keep up the macabre, so he has this happen. As they're going, so Fortunato's got a cough. This is one good thing about the story that I do like, is that Matresser, he's not trying to force Fortunato to go with him. Throughout the story, he keeps up. Okay, I can go back and get Lucchesio. You've got this cough. We're in this damp vault. You really shouldn't be here. Why don't you go back to the carnival, and I will get someone else to help. And he's actually giving Fortunato a chance to back out of this. There's an old saying that a good con man doesn't ask you for money; he asks you to take your money. A good con man gets you to ask him to take your money. And that's sort of what Montressor's doing here. He's giving Fortunato every chance to walk away from this, and Fortunato's not taking it. He's also luring him on with the Amontillado, which Montressor expects to get. Spoiler alert, like I said, there is no Amontillado. Yes, so for the name of the story, the Amontillado doesn't appear, and some people would say, well, that's a problem with the story, and in this case, no, it's basically it's being used as a lure, and so when you accept that, yes, there never was a Amontillado, it actually makes sense for the story that this is it's symbolism, greed, vanity, whatever. It's being used as a trap, and so it is acceptable that the cask never really appears. But in any case, back to foreshadowing. So Fortunato's got this cough. Um, Montressor, okay, you don't want to go back to Carnival, so let's have some wine as we go on. So the guy's already drunk, but let's get him more drunk. Opens a bottle, picks out a bottle, opens it as they're walking. He's drinking it, and at some point, Fortunato tosses the bottle up, and he makes a grotesque gesture as it's described. And Montressor's like, "Well, what's that all about?" And Fortunato, "Oh, aren't you a Mason? Yeah, that's a Masonic sign. Aren't you a Mason?" Montressor, he pulls out a trowel from under his cloak that he's wearing and says, "Yes, I am." So foreshadowing, because that trowel's going to come up. Not very good foreshadowing. It's not very obvious what this trowel stands for. However, even though it fails as foreshadowing, Fortunato's reaction to this is, "You're being ridiculous." Obviously, it's like, to one extent, it's like, "Oh, you're not a real Mason. I'm giving away Stiekerzeichen." And to another extent, he starts to make fun of Montressor a little. And "You're being ridiculous. You don't know what you're talking about," etc. And so we get a little of Fortunato's character from this again, and it's like I said, we don't know the exact insult that originated all this, but we're beginning to see, yes, he does sort of have an insulting personality, and we can get a little more out of that. Aside from that, like I said, it's meant to be foreshadowing. It's not very good foreshadowing. He also talks about the niter that's built up along, look, all this white powder that's building up along the walls, which I'm not sure if that's meant to be foreshadowing, but again, it's this, stuff that forms on the walls and covers over things, which comes up in the end. Yes, something gets covered up. But again, if that was meant to be foreshadowing, if the niter is meant to be foreshadowing, it's very poorly done foreshadowing. It doesn't really draw your attention to anything like good foreshadowing would do. So like I said, what looks like foreshadowing doesn't work, except for in one case, it does give us a little more into Fortunato's personality, which helps the story a little bit. I mean, like I said, we don't know the true nature of the insult that started all this, but we do see, the guy's a bit of a jerk. At one point, they get talking about Montressor's coat of arms, and he describes it as a golden foot crushing a serpent as the serpent bites the heel on a blue background, which basically hails from Genesis. Reading interpretations of the story, a lot of people are saying this is all about revenge. It's a little more than that. Again, go to Genesis. There shall be enmity between you and the serpent, and you shall crush his head, and he shall bite your heel. And some people say that was, that's a prophecy of Christ defeating Satan. Which, if Poe was reading it as that and he used this example, then Montressor's sort of got an ego problem. He's like, this insult is so great, it's up to the point of, Satan biting, piercing Christ's heel and Christ stepping on his head. Which, so we get a little bit of Montressor's personality if that was the point. If not, it's just a very overinflated symbolism, which, again, as a reference to the Bible, I would think most of his audience from the 1800s would have gotten it as such. Which apparently, like I said, the interpretations I've read online, no one really pulled that out. And so, that's something that, the original readers would have gotten better than normal readers, apparently, or modern readers. There's also an inscription with it. Let's see where I got that written. Nemo me impune las lacessit, um, which looked up online again because he doesn't give a translation of it, and that is, no one provokes me with impunity. In other words, I will have my revenge. So again, the story is all about revenge. Now, of course, looked this up online to find out what it meant, and also found out this was the motto of the Stuart dynasty back in the 1500s. Also, the modern motto of the Order of the Thistle and 3 Scottish regiments, which is again interesting because Montresor does not appear to be Scottish; he appears to be French. So, again, this is like once more Poe is pulling out this stuff which most of his readers wouldn't know off the top of their head. They'd have to look it up. It has nothing to do with the character. Like I said, it's in my opinion bad writing. Um, like I said, you can disagree. This is all my opinion. So we get to the end, and what happens is he ends up bricking up Fortunato. He's changed Fortunato to a wall inside an alcove and ends up bricking him up. Um, that's where the foreshadowing of the trowel comes in. Like I said, I warned you, spoiler alert, that's what happens. When he chains him to the wall, Fortunato starts to sober up. Or it sort of jolts him back into semi-sobriety or complete sobriety, because from that point on, like I said, this is an 8-page story. At this point, in like 2 or 3 short paragraphs, he describes him chaining him to the wall and bricking him in. And so it goes really fast. Fortunato initially is still calling for the Amontillado because, again, like I said, never comes up. It's the bait in the trap. It also, like I said, this is why I say it sort of stands for greed, because even as he's chained to the wall, he's still calling for it. So it's like he's greedy. But it takes about, I think, 10 layers of bricks to brick him in completely. And Poe describes this in one very short paragraph. It's like, by the time I got to the Fortunato, he's sobering up as this goes on and realizing his condition, but it's written in such a short amount of time that the reader gets nothing out of it. You know, as a horror story, we don't get the horror that Fortunato's feeling. We get, he starts to plead for his, freedom, but when that starts, it's like 2 or 3 lines he does that. We don't get any drawn out, nothing to let the horror sink in on us. It's just very quickly done. So, like I said, and Poe does this in some of his other writings. So, like I said, I don't think Poe was a great horror writer, because when he gets to writing horror, he just does it so quickly that you don't have time to think about it. You don't have time to empathize with any of the characters and realize what's going on. And so, like that, he has great ideas, and people have played off the themes of his ideas. But beyond that, he doesn't fill them out as well as they should be. Another thing is, in my opinion, a lot of, like I said, he writes on dark subjects, but they aren't all meant to be horror stories. Murder at the Rue Morgue was a mystery, and the murder was somewhat grim in nature, and yes, there were some horrible or horrific aspects to it, but the story itself was not meant to be a horror story, in my opinion. It was meant to be a mystery. The Premature Burial was more of a dark comedy than a horror story. And I'm willing to think the Cask of Amontillado was not meant to be a horror story so much as another dark comedy, in my opinion. Yes, a lot of the jokes, again, if you didn't have the background about, these, Latin or didn't know about the wine or any of that, then some of the jokes were inside jokes and people might not have gotten them as well as Poe intended. But again, it was more comedy than horror in the long run. Again, that's just my opinion. People are always free to disagree with me, but have a nice day.